Okay. This could be start of Volume 9 or Volume 2 Part 3 if you want to get technical. Oh boy. The prologue. Tuli was busy working at the table. Effa placed a cup of tea beside her just far enough away that it wouldn't get in her way, then sat down to watch her. Tuli had been given a truly ridiculous hair stick order by a customer, asking not just for decorative flowers, but for autumn fruits as well. Oh, Rosemine's order. So she had been throwing herself into her work as soon as she got home from her apprentice job to meet that request. She had even kept going after dinner. Effa sipped her own tea as she watched Tuli work, waiting for her to approach a good place to stop before starting a conversation. Did you hear what the tiny new High Bishop did at the coming-of-age ceremony yesterday, Tuli? I heard Laura talk about it at work. Her big sister came of age this season. Effa had heard about it from their neighbors whose children had come of age in the summer and seen that Tuli knew as well. We went to go and see mine, but we weren't able to see anything since the doors were closed, remember? Tuli said. I couldn't believe what Laura told me. She said that nobody was taking their prayers as seriously as the adults did during the Star Festival, so mine had to make everyone repeat them. Wow. Effa nodded with a bemused smile. The whole family had gone to the temple to see Rosemine, the High Bishop, after the coming-of-age ceremony, much like they did during the Star Festival, but they hadn't been able to see what was happening inside as the doors were kept shut during the proceedings. And when the doors did eventually open, the family was so focused on spawning mine and protecting Kami from being crushed by the flood of new adults that they hadn't paid attention to what anyone was saying. As a result, despite going all the way to the temple, they knew the least out of everyone. Laura's older sister was apparently really surprised to learn that a difference in the prayer can change how big the blessing is, Tuli said, coming to a good stopping point in her work. She set down the hair stick, then moved to the next seat over where her tea had been placed with a smile. Rumors of a tiny High Bishop capable of giving real blessings had spread through the town after the Star Festival marriages. And now people were talking about how she had made the youths repeat their prayers at the coming-of-age ceremony. One had to wonder whether anything to do with the temple had ever been talked about as much before. Maybe they were all just caught up in the excitement of seeing a real blessing, Effa suggested. But for the children, having a noble like the High Bishop tell them they weren't taking things seriously and that they needed to redo their prayers was scary. They thought they had messed up and would get punished. Mine should know that. Jeez. Tuli puffed out her cheeks in a pout. You aren't wrong, but I think the High Priest would want to make sure that the commoners don't look down on the High Bishop for being small, or treat her as a curiosity for being able to perform blessings. Mine had looked so much like a proper noble up on the distant altar that Effa doubted for a second whether it was really her. And when Tuli had returned from delivering a hair stick to her in the temple, she mentioned that Mine's movements were so elegant that she couldn't believe she was the same person. Mine had changed so much that even her parents could hardly recognize her from afar, and Effa was genuinely worried that she might be pushing herself unreasonably far to fully become a noble. Repeating the prayer was a necessary part of Mine surviving as a noble, I'm sure of it. I honestly think Mine was just being weird. I mean, nobody ever took their prayers seriously before now, Tuli said with pursed lips. Effa couldn't help but smile. Maybe that really was the case. Mine certainly would do strange things for reasons that only she understood. But now that she's a noble, it's hard to imagine she'll be able to keep that up and drag everyone around her into her crazy exploits. Well, let's say that she hasn't changed much on the inside. He thinks she made them repeat their prayers so that the kids being baptized in autumn would know they need to take their prayers seriously to get a blessing. I think everyone will be more serious now. Once she had finished her tea, Tuli returned to her original seat and got back to work on the hair stick. She had started over several times now, not at all satisfied with her first attempts. But now it was close to being finished. That hair stick is turning out really nicely, Effa said. Mine taught me the stitching technique in her letters. I never would have figured out how to make so many different fruits on my own. Not everyone could learn to crochet like that just by reading letters full of strange diagrams, Tuli. What you've done here is really impressive. Effa had watched as Tuli pored over Mine's letter, teaching herself through trial and error, so seeing the hair stick so close to completion meant a lot to her as well. On top of all the fruits, Tuli had made flower petals using thin, high-quality thread. These had then been attached to a base with hide glue to make a beautiful three-dimensional flower. She had even been given a new metal hook from the Gilberta Company to make the hair stick, which allowed her to stitch the flat threads more tightly to make something even prettier than usual. It's due in 3 days, so I'm going to work for as long as I can. I'm not going to let anyone take the job of making Mine's hair sticks away from me, because I think this is the only way I'll ever get to see her. When Tuli was at the Gilberta Company, Benno had apparently told her she would have even fewer opportunities to see Mine once she started spending more time in the castle. Knowing this, Tuli looked at the hair stick with a firm glare, her blue eyes filled with resolve. That night, while Gunter was drinking, Effa told him what she had spoken to Tuli about. She said that Mine is going to be spending less time in the temple, so we won't have as many chances to see her. We might not even get to watch her from a distance after the ceremonies. And even if that wasn't the case, so many of our neighbors are going to the autumn baptism ceremonies that we can't go ourselves, right? Effa thought it unlikely that anyone would connect Mine with the tiny high bishop. Mine hadn't spent much time with her neighbors, so her funeral was over, and there was a considerable distance between the floor of the chapel and the top of the altar. Plus, according to Lutz and Tuli, she carried herself so differently that she was almost unrecognizable. But having her family show up at the temple all the time would no doubt arouse suspicion. They would look weird peering into the temple after ceremonies, and if asked what they were doing, they would have no good answer. I know we have to keep our distance because of the magic contract, but I want to see Mine up close. I'm just really worried about her, Effa said. Yeah, you're the only one who doesn't get to see her in person. As a soldier, Gunter had been assigned to accompany and protect the priest, heading from Ehrenfest's temple to Haas, which would give him opportunities to see Mine. His excitement actually made Effa a little jealous. How about you go with Tuli when she delivers her hair sticks? I can't do that with Camille at home. You could ask someone to take care of him for you. Tuli got to see Mine, and she's still real inexperienced, so I'm sure you'll be fine. When she was growing up, Effa had often helped her dad, who was a former commander at the gate, at work. Her duties included serving tea at soldier meetings where various nobles were usually in attendance, and the language and manners she had learned from this put her on the same level as Lutz and Tuli when it came to etiquette skills. If she asked the Gilberta Company, there was a chance that she would be permitted to accompany Tuli to the temple to watch over her while she was still practicing her manners. But once Lutz and Tuli had fully mastered polite behavior, Effa wouldn't be given permission to visit nobles no matter how many times she asked. Children grow up so fast. This really is my only opportunity, Effa thought, feeling an indescribable sense of panic in her chest. Your good manners are only going to get you so far, though, Gunter continued. Once Mine moves to the castle, you won't be able to see her no matter what. The likes of us can't even go to the nobles' quarter, much less the castle. Not to mention, I can take a day off work to look after Camille for you right now, but once you start working again, getting days off will be a lot harder for you. He was right. Effa tightly gripped her chest. Her daughter had become a noble, and this was her last opportunity to see her. Gunter, could you ask for a day off 3 days from now? Effa had asked the Gilberta Company if she could accompany Tuli on her hair stick delivery, and they agreed. She would be allowed to visit the orphanage director's chambers. Mom, remember to call her Lady Rosemine here, okay? I know, Effa replied, looking around the chambers. Fran had said that it would be best for Effa to avoid coming to the temple while she was pregnant with Camille, so this was her first time entering the orphanage director's chambers. She had heard about it from Tuli and the others, but all they had said was that the door led straight into a hall that was bigger than their entire home, filled with fancy furniture, unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was hard to get an actual mental image from that. Effa took in her surroundings while Fran guided her to the second floor. A single home spread across more than one floor was such a foreign concept to her that she felt completely thrown off. Lady Rosemine, the Gilberta Company has arrived. Thank you, Fran. Rosemine turned in her ornately carved chair, wearing a beautiful fake smile, unlike any smile she had ever made at home. But her eyes shot wide open the instant she saw her visitors, and she let out a goofy covering her mouth with her hands. She was soon wearing that fake smile again, but it was clear to Effa that her daughter hadn't changed at all. Effa was holding back her laughter, and it seemed that Tuli and Lutz were too. They were clearly struggling to keep straight faces as they listened to Benno's greeting. This is a craftswoman who assists Tuli in making her hair sticks. I have brought her here so that she can introduce herself, Benno said. Rosemine stood up with a bright smile. The hair sticks you made are my prized possessions. I would ask that you show me the new one in this neighboring room, she said, before opening the door beside her bed and launching instructions at her knights and attendants. Effa passed through the door, surprised that there was another room inside of a room that was already so big. The moment that the door had shut, Rosemine shot a glare at Lutz and immediately turned into the mind that Effa knew so well. You didn't tell me she'd be here, Lutz. I was so surprised that I thought my heart was going to stop. Don't complain to me. Mrs. Effa asked to come along out of nowhere, and Mr. Gunter took a day off work to look after Camille. Faye's little sister has her baptism ceremony in autumn, so they won't be able to drop by the temple to see you then. If you're so unhappy about it, I just won't bring her here again. How's that sound? I take it all back. I was just so surprised that I didn't know what to say. Please bring her whenever you get the chance. Rosemine replied casually, showing that no matter how dressed up she was on the outside, she was still mine on the inside. But Effa didn't know how much interactions the magic contract would permit between them. She opened her mouth and then closed it again, searching for words to say but having no idea how she should talk to Rosemine. If one thing was for sure, it was that she shouldn't speak as her mother. Having Daniel the knight accompany them into the room made that more than clear. Effa had met Daniel when he guarded Mine back in her apprentice shrine maiden days, and while she knew he was a kind, warm-hearted individual, he was still a noble. If she messed up here, she would never get to see her daughter again. I am glad to see you well, Effa said. After racking her brain, the only thing she could think to say to her daughter at their long-awaited reunion was a stiff, formal greeting. Still, Rosamund broke into a wide grin, her happiness more than apparent. Effa knew that smile. Mine would make it whenever she wanted to be cuddled like a baby. But no cuddling will be permitted here. Tuli, present Lady Rosamund with her hair stick, Benno instructed. Tuli gave a small nod, then delicately took out the hair stick, repeating the process she had practiced over and over again at home. Her movements had been a bit awkward at first, but now they were smooth and precise. Effa could remember Tuli grumbling that mine was still able to do it more impressively than her, and now that she had seen how gracefully Rosamund moved, she found that easy to believe. Lady Rosamund, I present to you the new hair stick. Tuli had made a plethora of light yellow petals, then fixed them together around a stem using hide glue to make what looked just like a real flower. The word fancy hardly did it justice. The flower had then been cutely decorated with orange leaves and reddish fruits symbolic of autumn. It was clear that Tuli had poured her heart and soul into making the hair stick. Would you mind putting it on for me? Rosamund asked Effa before turning her back to her. At that, Effa looked at Benno and Tuli, double-checking that she would be allowed to. She then peered over at Daniel, who gave a slight nod as if giving her his permission. Effa picked up the hair stick that Tuli had made, then slowly approached Rosamund. Her intricately bundled hair was much glossier now than it had been in the past, and Effa's hands trembled as she carefully pushed the accessory into place. At the same time, she gently stroked Rosamund's hair from an angle that Daniel wouldn't be able to see. That was the best she could do for her daughter, who was so desperately yearning to be comforted. Does it look good on me? Came a quiet, tearful whisper. As Effa thought about how starved for warmth and comfort her daughter must have been, she could feel her chest tighten and her own eyes start to heat up. Oh, 'cause yeah, the nobles don't do hugs. They freaking don't do hugs. That sucks. Yes, Fairy, it looks very good on you, Effa answered, her voice trembling. When Rosamund turned around, Effa couldn't tell whether she was still smiling. The golden eyes looking at her were wavering, and it was clear that Rosamund wanted to hug her and call her mom. Oh, freaking magic contract. That sucks. Heck, it all sucks. But I mean, it was either that or everybody die. It sucks. It was a look that mine used to give whenever she was feeling anxious and craved comforting, like she was desperate for warmth and a temporary escape from the world. But after just a brief moment of vulnerability, Rosamund snapped back to her senses and replaced the expression with a sad smile. I concur, it looks very good on you, Benno said, stepping in to ease the mood. Rosamund turned to face him, and by the time she had already put on the fake smile of a noble, the hair stick is splendid, Tuli. It is even better than I had imagined it would be. The conversation turned to business, and there was nothing more Effa could do. She took a step back and just watched Rosamund talk. It was beyond frustrating to be within reach of her, but unable to actually hug her. Is there a noble out there who's willing to give mine a hugs when she needs them? I'm really starting to worry about that now, Effa thought. I know, she needs hugs. That's not fun. No wonder she's touch-starved. Well, at least Lutz can give her hugs. Discussing the Harvest Festival. With the hair stick that Mom and Tuli had given me stuck in my hair, it was time for me to face the autumn baptism ceremony. During the summer coming-of-age ceremony, I had told the children that they needed to pray properly, otherwise they wouldn't receive a blessing. And see them coming of age, that means they're becoming adults, so I guess they're still considered children? I don't know. I guess concept of teenagers doesn't apply in this. Seeing that my instruction had since spread through town, as even kids as small as me were praying with serious looks on their faces. I gave them a blessing while praising their faith on the inside, and the ceremony thus came to an end, but I couldn't help but feel a bit down about not getting to see my family. There will be a meeting at Third Bell today. Please accompany me to the meeting room. Fran made a sudden appearance the next day, and I cocked my head in confusion. I've never heard of meetings being held in the temple before. What kind of meeting is it? I suppose this is your first meeting here, Lady Rosamund. They are held the day after a baptism ceremony to discuss when baptisms will be held in the nobles' quarter and who will be sent where. In the autumn, it must also be decided who will go where for the Harvest Festival, and the same is done during the spring for the spring prayer, Fran explained. I clapped my hands together in realization. I had been kept out of the previous meeting since I was underage, and the priest didn't want a commoner butting in on such a considerable source of money. But now that I was the High Bishop, I would apparently need to participate in every meeting. Well, of course, you're the frickin' highest authority in the temple. Of course you're going to have to participate. Underage or not. It seemed that my status of apprentice shrine maiden really had just been for show last year. Fran, I know nothing of the matters within the duchy. Could I ask you to give me a brief rundown prior to the meeting? Once Wilfred finished learning his letters, both he and I were going to be assigned an instructor to teach us geography and history, but that was still some time away, and I couldn't attend a meeting about sending people across the duchy without knowing anything myself. A map will be necessary to explain, but there is no time to borrow one from the high priest. I shall put that aside for now and explain the Harvest Festival. As the name implied, the Harvest Festival was a festival where farming towns celebrated their crop harvest and expressed their gratitude to the gods. Each town needed to be visited by a blue priest and a scholar, with the priest performing ritual rites while the scholars collected taxes. In farming towns, the Harvest Festival was also apparently where baptisms, coming-of-age ceremonies, and wedding ceremonies were held. Oh, okay. Farming towns have such low populations that doing this event at any other time would be absurd, Fran continued. They couldn't feasibly be held during spring prayer since food was scarce from the long winter hibernation, plus everyone would be preparing to return to their summer residence. Fran then went on to explain that on top of attending these ceremonies, we would need to spend the Harvest Festival collecting chalices from towns with gyves, the name for nobles who ruled over land. Compared to spring prayer, where we just had to go and deliver chalices and give blessings, it seems the Harvest Festival will be quite busy. It is third bell, Lady Rosamond. Shall we head to the meeting room? Fran asked. The meeting room was about as big as a school classroom, and several long tables were lined up end to end in the big rectangle. A quick glance around was enough for me to confirm that all of the blue priests were in attendance, yet half the tables were still empty. It was obvious that we had a serious shortage of priests on our hands. All eyes were on me as I walked alongside the tables, eventually taking the seat that Fran had pulled out for me. I felt a little arrogant for sitting at the very end of such a long sequence of tables, but I was the High Bishop. I was of a higher status than anyone else here. Ferdinand's always so cocky, it's easy to forget I actually have more status than him here. Yeah. I will now discuss the autumn baptism ceremony as well as the Harvest Festival, Ferdinand declared. He listed off essential topics one by one, progressing through the meeting at a steady pace. Along the way, Egmont complained that he wasn't being given the same locations as last time. Well, too bad. Ferdinand silenced him with a condescending glare. Why would you ever think your accommodations this year would be the same as last year? The scared blue priests had apparently all convinced themselves that since I hadn't taken action against them yet, that they would be accommodated in exactly the same way they had always have been. They sure were optimistic. More like in denial. Just because Rosamond the High Bishop has not punished you severely for your past transgressions does not mean that you will be permitted to act the same way as you always have. If you do not follow both her and my directives, expect to be banished from the temple, Ferdinand stated coldly, knowing that the priests had no homes to return to. Haha. He then announced who would be sent where in the nobles' quarter for the baptism ceremonies. Why aren't you or the High Bishop performing any baptisms? One priest asked. The High Bishop and I have duties within the castle, not to mention there is the potential need for us to assist the Knight's Order. What we do cannot be done by any of you, and thus I will have you all focus on the work that you are able to do. Furthermore, I intend to distribute future assignments based on your contributions to the greater good of the temple during the Harvest Festival. I see. Thank you for your answer. Ferdinand also mentioned that the paperwork the previous High Bishop had refused to do would ultimately be distributed among the blue priests, but that seemed like something that wouldn't be relevant for a long time yet. That is all. Everyone, formulate your schedules and take care not to procrastinate. In the end, the meeting concluded with me still not recognizing the names of any of the places where the priests would be sent. Fran had frantically written it all down on his diptych, so I would have him use a map to explain everything to me. Or so I thought, but Ferdinand called out to me just as I stood from my seat. Rosamond, I will give you more precise details this afternoon. Wait in your chamber so that I may visit you then. Not long after lunch, Ferdinand arrived with Zom, who had all sorts of documents that he began spreading out on the table. Ferdinand instructed him on where to position the map and how to order the documents, and asked me just how much I knew about the Harvest Festival. Only what I heard from Fran right before the meeting. I barely know anything at all. Scholars collect taxes, priests and shrine maidens perform rituals. We also collect some of each town's harvest as a tithe, in which you may use for winter preparation, Ferdinand explained. The food would be a huge boon for the orphanage, but I wasn't sure how they were going to handle all the crops that would surely build up in the carriages as they went from town to town. Each priest will go to 15 different towns, right? The amount of crops they have to transport will surely build up very quickly, and wouldn't some rot along the way? For what purpose exactly do you think the scholars are accompanying them? The collected harvest will be transported back to the castle through the use of teleportation circles. Oh, okay. According to Ferdinand, teleportation circles were types of magic circles that came in pairs. One was used to send objects, the other to receive them. The scholar would leave for the Harvest Festival with the sending magic circle and would then send their gathered taxes to the receiving magic circle in the castle. The food gathered by the Blue Priests would be teleported there as well, and they would have to go to the castle themselves to retrieve it at a later date. I had no idea such a convenient magic tool existed. What value would there be in a magic tool that does not make life easier? Take care not to waste my time by stating the obvious. She was a commoner, dude. How do you not expect her to not know this stuff? Magic tools were apparently focused on practicality since they ended up used up valuable mana, and a good magic tool was one that brought the most value to the largest number of people. I think that trade would improve and even flourish if merchants could use those magic tools, I said. They were powerful enough to send a town's harvest across the duchy all at once. If used for trade, merchants wouldn't have to venture along their usual dangerous routes, and lower shipping fees would reduce the price of merchandise. But, yeah, they don't have a... Oh, wait, did they have to have mana to use those? Ferdinand agreed with my idea, looking a little bored. I, too, think that merchants would already be using the tools if they had mana of their own. Ferdinand, I would like magic tools that can be used without mana. Such a thing would fundamentally not be a magic tool, Ferdinand said, offering a flat response before changing the subject. True. That is true. Now, regarding the Harvest Festival locations. I didn't recognize any of the town names, and I understood next to nothing that was said in the meeting, I confessed. In my lessons prior to my baptism, the only thing I had been taught that was relevant to geography was my extended family and the land they owned. But the provinces I knew were being visited by other Blue Priests, meaning I personally wouldn't be going to any of them. I'll be explaining that now. Take a look at this map, Ferdinand said, and Zom spread something out on the table. It was a map just like the one Ferdinand Karstedt had been poring over prior to spring prayer, with land separated by red and blue zones. The red area is the central district, land ruled directly by the Archduke. The blue area is land ruled by Gives. As this will be your first harvest festival, I have assigned you to towns relatively close to Ehrenfest, Ferdinand said before pointing at various towns, labeling them Day 1 and Day 2 while Fran listed their names. You say close to Ehrenfest, but we seem to be going pretty far north and south. That is because you will be gathering materials at the same time, Ferdinand said, putting his finger on a place called Dorvan, whatever. It was the southernmost town I would be visiting. The forest on the edge of Dorvan contains the fate plant known as a ruella, which bears fruits on nights with a full moon. It is a known fact that autumn mana is strongest on the night of Shitsaria, and that it is easier to gather wind materials of potential magic energy there. The night of Shitsaria? You mean the final full moon of autumn when Abeglaven, the god of life, resurrects, and Shitsaria, the goddess of wind, uses all her strength to prevent him from reaching the goddess of earth, I asked, thinking back to the legend I had read in the Bible. Ferdinand nodded. It is good to see that your reading is producing results. Indeed, a ruella fruit gathered on the night of Shitsaria will be necessary to brew your Jarev, whatever. Of all the autumn materials that can be gathered within Ehrenfest, the ruella has the highest purity of wind, the element of autumn, while also having an enormous quantity of mana within it, making it the best quality material that one could ask for. What do you mean by highest purity? A material that only that has one dominant element and only minor contamination from other elements is said to have a high purity. In contrast, a material with multiple elements of similar strength is said to be multi-elemental. Okay. The potion I needed, known as a Jarev, apparently required high purity materials from each season, so it would take me at least a full year to get everything I needed, and since my mana had hardened so long ago that I didn't even remember when exactly it happened, I would need materials of the highest possible quality. As I must depart for the Harvest Festival myself, I will not be accompanying you. Even though we did spring prayer together, that was because you were faced by various dangers at the time, and there was also matters that I needed to investigate. It seemed we would be doing things separately this time. That seemed a bit bold, since this was going to be my first Harvest Festival. My face clouded with unease, but Ferdinand waved a hand at me dismissively. It will be fine. In addition to your existing knights, I will assign Eckert and Justice to guard you. Listen well to what they say. I tilted my head, not recognizing one of those names. I know Eckert, but who is Justice? The tax official who will be accompanying you, and Riarda's son. I had a feeling that Riarda's son would be someone I could rely on. Ferdinand had probably selected knights who would pose no potential threat to me, and both Eckert and Riarda's son were close to the Archduke in their own ways. Both the material gathering and the harvest festival will go smoothly if you follow their instructions. When the time comes, I shall deliver the tools that you will need to gather the Ruella. I see you will still be working hard for my sake. I thank you ever so much, I said, surprised by how thorough he was being. I could tell that he was determined to make sure the gathering was a success no matter what. There is still time before the middle of autumn where the harvest festival will begin. In the meantime, master flying your high beast. Oh, and I received word from Benno. It seems he would like to send the Grey Priest to Haas's orphanage. Almost said Hodge. Not frickin' Hodge Village. Yes, I heard. Benno had told me that the doors were now fitted, and all the essential furniture had been brought inside. All that was left was moving the Grey Priests and Shrine Maidens over and getting them set up before the Harvest Festival. He has asked that we assign soldiers from the gate to protect the priests as they travel with all their food and goods, Ferdinand continued. There certainly was a lot of stuff they had to transport from our orphanage to ours. From our orphanage to theirs, I mean. And while Haas was only a half a day away from Ehrenfest, thieves would no doubt target us if we started transporting loads of goods day after day. In fact, we had apparently already been targeted. We would need guards, but soldiers wouldn't be able to accompany regular merchants under normal circumstances. Soldiers only acted when the city needed to be protected, or when the Archduke ordered them to. We can assign guards to them since the Gilberta Company is working on the Archduke's orders, right? Indeed. I was thinking of giving this duty to the commander at the Eastern Gate. If you have no objections, Ferdinand said, glancing my way. He was talking about Dad. I'll go by carriage too, I exclaimed, shooting my hand up in excitement at the prospect of seeing him. I had been planning to go by high beast since I'm not a big fan of carriages, but if it means I get to see Dad, then I'm all for it. You fool! A daughter of the Archduke would be guarded by the knight's order if she were to travel outside the city by carriage. A mere commoner soldier would not be needed, nor would they be of any help whatsoever. Oh, what? I thought this was my chance to see him. This sucks. As I slumped my shoulders, hope turning to despair in an instant, Ferdinand rubbed his temples. Let people finish speaking before you jump to conclusions, he sighed. You and I will be traveling with your guard knights by high beast. But while you will be staying in Haas, I intend to entrust the soldiers with guarding you. You will likely get many opportunities to see him once you are in Haas itself. Good grief. Ferdinand's exasperated explanation shot my spirits back up, and I gave my thanks to the gods with a broad smile on my face. Once Ferdinand had finished his explanation, I returned to the orphanage director's chambers. I immediately asked Monica to fetch Lutz and Gil from the workshop and eagerly awaited their arrival. As soon as they showed up, I instructed Daniel with guarding me and immediately entered the hidden room, pretending not to hear him mutter, "Am I going to have to see that again?" That. What's that? A hug? Let's, I sang as I leaped into his arms. It seemed he couldn't keep up with my bubbling energy, so as he immediately gave in and hugged me back, warning me in a tired voice that I was going to catch a fever again. Guess what? Dad's going to be assigned to guard the Grey Priest heading to Haas's orphanage. I'm going to see him again for the first time in ages, I explained, feeling so happy that I could dance. Lutz blinked several times and gave me a confused frown. Huh? Master Benno said that the nobles will be traveling by high beast, so not even the guards would get to see them. I heard from Tully and Mr. Otto that Mr. Gunter got so impressed over it that he was barely working at all. Word about the guard duty had apparently already reached the gate, and Dad had leaped at the opportunity the second he heard. Only later did he learn that I would be traveling by high beast, and now he was so depressed that he had been complaining each and every day about not wanting to go back to work. In other words, he had gotten just as depressed as I had over not being able to meet. This sure is a weird thing connecting us, I thought, chuckling a little before explaining the circumstances to Lutz. While it's true that I'll be traveling to Haas by high beast, the soldiers will be assigned to guard me while I'm there. So Ferdinand said we'd get to see each other every now and then. Really? Man, I gotta go tell Mr. Gunter about this. He's so depressed right now, and that's just what we need to motivate him again. Tell him I'm looking forward to seeing him, too. Oh, and I'll write a letter to him, I said, hastily scrawling. I can't wait to see you in Haas. Good luck at work. On a sheet of paper which I folded and handed to Lutz. The next day, Lutz came back with a grin to tell me how delivering the news had gone. Dad had apparently sprung back to life after reading the letter, so full of energy that it was almost comical. Mom and Tully had laughed about how nothing they'd said could cheer him up, yet a single letter had worked magic on him. How far am I? I'm sleepy. So very sleepy. Haas's monastery. Today was a day that the Grey Priests and Shrine Maidens were due to move to Haas. 2 carriages that had been provided by Benno were lined up by the temple's back gate, connecting to the lower city. Everyone in the orphanage had gathered to see them off, as 3 priests stepped into one carriage and 3 Shrine Maidens into the other. Mark will be riding with the Grey Priest, while Lutz will be with the Shrine Maidens. Please take care, everyone. Thank you. I'll watch over your esteemed Grey Priest, Lady Rosemine. Mark said while kneeling. I gave him a courteous nod, then as a representative of the orphanage, but I couldn't help but look right over Mark's shoulder as I did. He and Lutz gave wry grins and followed my gaze. There knelt a single soldier. Despite having been ordered to guard the priest from the east gate to Haas, Dad had come to the temple to see the priests leave in their carriages. I greeted him as well, barely holding back my smile. I will soon be leaving for Haas myself, I said. I entrust guarding the priest to you. You can count on me, Dad responded, standing up with a grin and tapping his chest twice. I did the same, then watched the carriages depart. I will be heading for Haas 3 days from now, since that was the bare minimum it would take for the carriages to arrive there, and everyone to finish settling in. As time passed, I counted down on my fingers how many days were left until I could go and see Dad again. Rosamund, are you sure about this? I believe it will be best for you to ride with Bridget, Ferdinand said with a surly expression when I created my high beast at the temple's front gate. But I had taken my training seriously, and I was now good enough at driving Leslie that I'll be perfectly fine on my own. Haas is the city closest to Ehrenfest. If I can't manage to fly there, then there's no way I could fly the long distance required for the Harvest Festival. I'll travel by panda bus for the sake of practice. I agree that you need more practice, however... Ferdinand trailed off, being surprisingly wishy-washy about this, even though he himself had said that I needed practical experience. Lord Ferdinand, Bridget interjected, if you are that concerned, may I suggest that I ride with Lady Rosamund? As I am also a wielder of mana, we can evacuate on my high beast if need be. This way she will be safer than she would be otherwise. True. Bridget, would you feel comfortable doing that? I have seen Lady Rosamund's improvement with my own eyes. She has my trust. Bridget said in a cool and confident tone, but I could see that her amethyst eyes were twinkling. It seemed to me that she was at least a little interested in riding my panda bus. She made her high beast disappear and walk over, so I opened the door on the passenger side. Ferdinand lowered his eyes in defeat as he watched on. If you insist, Bridget, I'll leave her to you. Bridget bobbed her head in a nod and stepped into my panda bus. I got into the driver's seat myself and closed all the doors. Bridget, please fasten your seatbelt. Pull this and click it into here. I explained, putting my own seatbelt on to demonstrate. Safety first, after all. Only the driver's seat had morphed to match to my size, so the passenger seat beside me looked super big and tall from my perspective. Stroking the side of her seat, Bridget smiled. This truly is a cute high beast. Right? He's so cute, isn't he? Thank you! Ferdinand's the only one who didn't like it, as far as I know. Ferdinand treated it like something weird, but I knew my panda bus was cute. Maybe I would be able to discuss his cuteness with a fellow girl. I looked up at Bridget with hopeful eyes, only for her to flinch in regret and awkwardly clear her throat. That meant that in the sense that it is a good match for you. I thank you ever so much. Now it's time for liftoff. I gripped the panda bus by its steering wheel, pouring mana into him, and then stepped on the accelerator to chase after Ferdinand's high beast, which had already flown off. He began running on his tiny panda legs, and when I pulled the steering wheel back, started soaring through the air. I never considered that one could sit inside a high beast. The seat is very comfortably soft, and it's nice that I would necessarily not have to change your clothes designed for riding a high beast. I have a feeling that ladies in noble society might wish to copy this design, Bridget said. It seemed that fine noblewomen had to change into clothes made for riding high beasts, since sitting on the back of an animal required you to spread your legs to straddle it, but no such accommodations were necessary to ride the panda bus. Were there no carriages when high beasts were first made, I wonder? High beasts were made in the image of animals, and the spell is not equipped to create carriages or anything of the like. The concept of riding inside the animal itself is definitely new, and it is a very wonderful idea in my opinion. Retrospectively, I probably wouldn't have thought to ride inside of an animal either, had I not grown up around anime and theme parks full of animal rides. But for all of Bridget's compliments, I couldn't exactly celebrate much, after all the original idea here definitely wasn't mine. I wasn't sure whether it would be trendy among women, since Ferdinand looked so displeased with him. I confided. The panda bus's legs waved about through the air as he followed after Ferdinand's lion. My red panda is so super cute. Our high beast landed by the monastery. It appeared that someone had been keeping watch, as Benno and the others immediately came outside. Hang on. Yeah, that's right. Or came outside. The Gilberta company, the Grey Priest, and the soldiers guarding them were all kneeling. I climbed out of my high beast and returned him to his face stone form, which I then placed in the cage hanging off my belt. It took me a bit longer than it took Ferdinand and Daniel, but still, I was getting better. With that done, I took a half step in front of Ferdinand. Had we been able to do things my way, then I would have been hiding behind him instead, but I had been told it was improper for the high priest to stand ahead of the high bishop. Ferdinand looked across the people kneeling, then nodded. We appreciate your welcome. Now we shall see the inside of the monastery at once. Everyone stood up. I made eye contact with Dad, who was standing at the very front of the soldiers, and we exchanged smiles. That was all we could do with Ferdinand and the others around. I shall start with the girls' building, Benno said, taking the role of guide as he led us inside. The previously empty doorways now had doors, and there were boxes for putting personal belongings in alongside mattresses on the floor. The beds should be ready by winter. Given the rush, we prioritized making the rooms livable. I nodded repeatedly. The rooms being livable was important. Boxes and mattresses were about all the orphans would need, since they didn't have any personal belongings to begin with. This room is for handling paperwork, Bendel continued. There is an identical one in the boys' building. The room had been set up with chairs, desks, and writing utensils. The Grey Shrine maidens will be tasked with writing documents regarding food and living expenses, while the Grey Priest will be tasked with writing reports on the workshop. The dining hall only had a makeshift table that consisted of a board resting on several boxes. The rest will be prepared later. The carpenters had been using it while working on the monastery, and it apparently had been more than good enough for them to eat on. Since it was already the afternoon, the soldiers and the Gilberta company would be spending the night in the monastery as well. That meant everyone would be having dinner together, which demanded an extra board or two be added onto the table. Like in the temple, the basement of the girls' dorm was a kitchen, and it was equipped with pots, metal griddles, and an oven like in my kitchen. It also had wooden plates and cutlery, so eating here would be just like eating in the temple's orphanage. It is a bit excessive for an orphanage's kitchen, but we went the extra distance, so we knew you'd be visiting, Lady Rosemind. I thank you ever so much. My chefs will surely appreciate it. There was an exit in the basement of the girls' building, just like there was in the temple, leading to the basement of the boys' building, which had been made into a workshop. It had all of the tools and materials it would need to operate as a Rosemind workshop. The only things it didn't have were various metal type letters and a letterpress printer, but given that the latter demanded the strength of several adult men, and we had a shortage of personnel, they will be focusing on papermaking and mimeograph printing for now. We will begin the printing process once more people have arrived, but for now this should be enough for the workshop to function, Benno said while leading us upstairs. The rooms in the boys' building were just like those in the girls' building, furnished with boxes and mattresses to make them livable. It seemed that this is where the soldiers and the Gilberta company will be staying. These kids are just orphans and they're living better than us, huh? One of the soldiers accompanying us grumbled with a grimace. Would you like to become a priest then? You won't be permitted to marry or leave the temple, and your life will be constantly shaken around by the whims of blue priests, but if that sounds like a pleasant life to you, then we'll be gladly welcome you into the monastery, I said, unable to remain silent. I knew nothing about the orphan situation, that they were stuck in the orphanage until their baptism, that they could be easily discarded if unneeded, or that they could die if there was no one around to take care of them. And yet they had the gall to say they lived better lives than them? The soldier quickly noticed my frustration, and the blood drained from his face. He knelt down and said, "Forgive me, I did not mean to offend," before offering a variety of excuses. Lady Rosamond, it is understandable that they would think that after seeing how we live now, it is thanks to you and your efforts in the temple that our quality of life has seen such a dramatic improvement. They have no way of knowing how much worse our lives would be if not for you, one great priest said, trying to console me with praise. All the while, I could see Dad proudly nodding along with a look on his face that seemed to say, "Isn't my daughter incredible?" Don't just nod in agreement. Think about the soldier trembling on the ground right now. Isn't he yours, I thought, but seeing Dad acting so proud of me like usual eased my anger, and my shoulders soon loosened up. I imagine you spoke without thinking, but I would ask that you take care before making such prejudicial assumptions about others, I said. I have no excuse. It won't happen again, the soldier said apologetically. I had forgiven him, and so the matter ended. The matter ended there. Next up was the chapel. It had two impressive, ornately carved wooden doors, which immediately exuded the majestic aura that one would expect from a chapel. As the great priest pushed them open, I saw that the previously pure white floor inside now had a carpet laid atop of it, and there was an altar at the far end of the room meant for holding the statues of the gods. The chapel wasn't too large overall, but it definitely had the same atmosphere as the temple. Benno, when will the statues be ready? Ferdinand asked, looking at the unadorned altar. I am told it will take 1 more month. I see, so they will be ready in time for the harvest festival. Excellent. Rosamond, follow me. I will now make your room. Ferdinand took out a face stone, pressed it against the wall at about waist height, then made his staff appear and began to chant something. In no time at all, a band of red light started to stretch out from the face stone, extending up until it was about 15 centimeters taller than Ferdinand before splitting in two and moving in opposite directions. After growing for a bit longer, the band suddenly bent at a 90-degree angle and headed straight down, then bent at another 90-degree angle just before they touched the ground. The two lines were now headed toward one another, moving parallel to the floor until they eventually fused back together. Finally, the light stretched straight up to return to the face stone, which then started to shine intensely. When the brightness faded, the face stone was embedded in the door to a hidden room. Rosamond, register your mana here and build your room. Okay. I put my hand on the face stone and registered my mana with it just like I had with the hidden room in my own chambers. Back then, it had been so high up that I needed to use a chair to touch it, but here it was low enough that I could reach it from the ground. It was only then that I realized Ferdinand had adjusted the height for my convenience. I let my mana flow while thinking of my room in the temple, and when the door opened to signal the end of the registration, it revealed a room that looked to be exactly the same size. You may order furniture and any other things you need, and have them brought here, Ferdinand said, looking over at Benno and Mark. I followed his gaze. They were smiling, but I could see in their eyes that they were taken aback by being expected to do more work. Sorry. I'm really sorry. Oh, yes, and pour your mana into this until the color has completely changed, Ferdinand instructed, pointing at a face stone that was embedded in the back wall at the far end of the chapel. What is it? Something essential for protecting the monastery. As of now, it still contains mana from when it was constructed, but that will not last until spring. Protecting this place is one of your duties. I steadily poured my mana into the protection magic tool to charge it. I had expected it to require a ton of mana to protect the whole monastery, but as it turned out, the amount it needed was surprisingly small. I guess probably surprisingly small for you. We looped back through the monastery and returned to the front door. It was time for us nobles to hurry up and leave so that everyone else could get back to working on the monastery and preparing dinner. I see that the monastery is more than livable, I said to a gray shrine maiden who responded with a smile. Yes, I think we will be just fine here. I suggest that you all stay here for a while. If everything is determined to be fine, we can go and get the orphans. We shall return in 3 days to check up on things. Please tell me then if you need anything else, I said, giving each priest and shrine maiden a diptych. I had asked Benno to prepare them in advance since they would be essential for their work. These have your names engraved on them, which means they are not shared property, but your own personal belongings. Consider them my gift to you for the work you will soon be performing in this monastery. I pray that they will be of use. We are honored. The priests, knowing that only my attendants had carried diptychs in the temple, broke into grins as they looked at their names on the diptychs. Lutz, is everything ready? I asked. Of course, he replied, handing me a cloth pouch that made a small clinking noise as it moved. I took it from him and turned to face the soldiers. Thank you all for your efforts in guarding us today. I cannot offer you much, but I hope to express my appreciation with a gift. You may accept this without worry, I said. The soldiers rarely went outside the city, so it wasn't hard to imagine that their families would be worried about them. I'd been gone for so many days in a row, my gift was like a bonus, or a company covering its employees' travel expenses. I intended to ask them to guard Benno's supply of caravans in the future, so the more they liked us, the better. It may come to pass that I ask you to guard us again in the future, for if so, I trust you to serve us well. I handed them a small silver coin each, and eventually I reached Dad. Watching the others exchange greedy looks out of the corner of my eye, I sneakily gave him, alone, a large silver. Please praise them for their work, I whispered quietly, and Dad grinned in response. At that, I addressed the rows of soldiers once more. I must be leaving now, but remember that men are not allowed in the girls' building under any circumstances. I trust that none of you are immoral men who would seek to lay hands on my shrine maidens, but those in charge to take care to keep their men under control. Violators shall not be forgiven under any circumstances, I said, glaring at them to drive my point home. Dad and the Gilberta Company were fine for sure, but people in the lower city looked down upon those in the temple orphanage. I didn't want any of them to relax once I was gone and try to blow off some steam by laying their grubby hands on the shrine maidens. I wasn't joking when I said that all of the shrine maidens still in the orphanage were absolute babes, so firmly putting my foot down for safety's sake was crucial. Ferdinand summoned his high beast as I followed suit and made my panda bus. Bridget got in with me, and off we went. It would be 3 days before he returned to Haas. Upon returning to Ehrenfest, I received reports from Benno and Dad completing the third picture book that I will be printing, one based around Leidenschaft, the god of fire, and his subordinate gods, and met with Wilma to ask her to draw the illustrations. The 3 days passed before I knew it. Assuming the priests hadn't experienced any problems living in the monastery, it would be time to start thinking about bringing the orphans. This time I'll be meeting the mayor of Haas. Rosemine, do you truly intend to make your attendance ride in that thing? Ferdinand asked, looking at my family car-sized panda bus like he was walking, or rather flying, garbage. Of course, that's why he's a panda bus, I replied, not bothered by his lack of taste in the slightest. My attendants were happy at least. Whoa, Lady Rosemine, the door just stretched open. So cool. Wow, the seat is so soft and comfy. Gil was so excited that he didn't even realize he'd stopped speaking politely, while Nicola's never-ending interest in new things meant that she was completely full of glee from the moment she had packed her luggage and climbed inside. Fran was the only one looking at the panda bus with an expression of abject despair and grim resolve. I am prepared to travel with you until the end of my days, Lady Rosemine. Fran, you don't need to look like you're about to step off a cliff. It's not that dangerous. Bridget rode with me last time just fine. And I shall ride again. Fear not, Bridget said, getting into the front passenger seat. Fran, stealing his resolve once and for all, clenched his teeth and climbed into the back seat. Does everyone have their seatbelts on? We're about to go, I said before flying off. Fran was nervously gripping his seatbelt while Gil and Nicola let out cries of excitement as the panda bus soared through the air. Whoa, so high. Lady Rosemine, the city looks so small. Fran, look out the window. Gil, Nicola, you mustn't speak to Lady Rosemine right now. She needs to focus. Fran immediately scolded them, and I couldn't help but smile. Fran, I can talk while driving just fine. Please don't. I beg you to focus. He's terrified. Poor guy. I feel bad for Fran. The poor guy was terrified the entire time. I'm guessing he's never ridden on a high beast before? Maybe? Because I would assume that he's done that with Ferdinand probably, but I don't know. I guess not, considering I think attendants normally ride in carriages if they're using high beasts. So, yeah, he's probably never ridden on a high beast before. We arrived at Haas before long. My attendant started to unload my luggage once I had landed in front of the monastery, and a number of grey priests came out to help them carry it inside. Once everything had been brought into the hidden room at the far end of the chapel, my attendants began setting up my room. It wouldn't take long since we had only brought the carpet and tapestries with us. A spare bed from the temple will be brought here later so that I wouldn't have to worry much about collapsing. While that was going on, Ferdinand and I were resting in the dining hall being served tea by a grey shrine maiden while we ate the sweets we had brought. How is life here? I asked the grey priest while sipping my tea. All has been well. Having the forest and river so close by has made paper-making much easier, one responded. There was a tinge of nervousness in his voice, no doubt due to Ferdinand being here. I looked over to the shrine maiden who had poured our tea. Would things continue to be okay if we were to bring the orphans here? I believe so. We can start preparing lunch so that they can be brought over at once. At that, Ferdinand, my attendants, and I traveled by high beast to see Haas's highest authority, the mayor. Incidentally, despite us having informed them of our arrival in advance, the servant who greeted us almost immediately freaked out and started floundering. They probably hadn't prepared at all. The high bishop and the high priest, you say? Wasn't the merchant supposed to be the one coming? Benno had passed on the announcement that we would be coming for the orphans, but it seemed that he had failed to mention that Ferdinand and I would be the ones collecting them. Judging by how the mayor was practically frothing at the mouth when he burst into the room, I could guess that Benno had not been treated exceptionally well here. So yeah, he's being petty. "Where are the orphans?" Ferdinand asked sharply. "We informed you of our arrival ahead of time. Bring them here at once." The mayor gulped in air and immediately had a servant go and summon the orphans. Soon, a crowd of bony-looking children with unwashed hair and dirty clothes came into the room. They reminded me of the temple's orphans when I first saw them, and a single glance was all it took for me to know how hard their lives were. I counted that there were 14 children, which confused me. This isn't everyone, is it? I was told that there were more. "I'm sure that whoever told you that was mistaken," the mayor said with a smile as he knelt before us. Only for one of the orphan boys to glare at him and shake his head hard. "No, he's lying. He hid Martha and my sister so he could sell them." "Shut it, Thor," the mayor shouted, his eyes flaring with rage as he stood up to strike the boy, but Daniel smoothly stepped forward, pinning the mayor's arm behind his back, and drew his staff. Lord Ferdinand ordered all of the orphans to be brought forward. Did you not hear him, or are you deliberately defying him? Yeah, you're defying the high priest, the high bishop, a.k.a. the Archduke's adopted daughter. Are you really going to do this? Daniel asked coldly. For a mere commenter like the mayor defying a direct order from Ferdinand, the half-brother of the Archduke was like signing his own death sentence. He could be executed here and now without anyone batting an eye. The mayor gasped at the sight of Daniel drawing his weapon with zero hesitation. "Someone, anyone, go get Nora and Martha." 2 young girls were brought into the room, both so pretty that I understood why they had been singled out to be sold. We now had the correct number of orphans that Benno had reported, so I began to speak to them. "Would any of you like to move to the orphanage I have built? You will become priests and shrine maidens, but I'm not forcing anyone to come against their will. You will have a place to sleep and eat at the monastery, but you will need to work and live according to our rules." The orphans fearfully looked between the mayor and I, aside from Thor, who simply looked straight at me. "If you're not going to sell my sister, she and I will go with you." Yeah, I think anything would be better than what they're already dealing with. "Thor," muttered the older of the 2 girls, a worried look on her face. She was probably his sister. The mayor reached out a hand toward her to interrupt what was happening. "Hold it. Nora's not leaving." "Yes, she is. Yes, she is." "Silence. Lady Rosemine has not permitted you to speak," Daniel said, pushing the kneeling mayor's head back down. Ferdinand narrowed his eyes coldly at the mayor. That was the look he gave when he was getting annoyed. I turned my back to the chilly air gathering around him so that I could speak to Nora. "What do you want to do, Nora? If you move to our orphanage, we will never sell you." "But great priests and shrine maidens are not permitted to marry." "No, not like orphans can get a proper marriage anyway," Thor spat out. "I'm not asking you, Thor. I'm asking Nora." Nora lowered her eyes for a moment, then looked at me. "I'll go. I won't be able to marry here either, and I was about to be separated from Thor forever." "Anything is better than being sold," she said with a sad smile. "Aw, I think she's kind of crushing on Thor. That's sweet." "Then I shall welcome you. If Thor's going, me and Martha are too," another boy said, taking the hand of the girl who had been brought in with Nora. "Rick, are you sure?" Thor asked. If we stay here, Martha's getting sold next. Next? As in he's done this before? It seemed the other orphans didn't intend to defy the mayor, so they all just shook their head and asked to stay. Whether they were scared of changing environments or scared because Daniel had been violent with their owner, the mayor, I couldn't tell, but either way I didn't intend to force them to join. I shall take these four, then. Is that okay with you, Ferdinand? Quite. We did what we came here to do, and nothing more. Let us depart. The mayor just watched us leave in a daze, no longer having the two girls in his possession whom he had hidden from us to sell. Jerk. Hopefully the other orphans will decide to come in their own time. Because I would think that, anything would be better than, way they were treated, more than likely. But I think that time will tell on that. Anyway, I'll get to work on editing this, and I'll see y'all next time.